Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets and Runners. So today is going to be part 2 of that tier list video where we rank every single racket that we carry at the store. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, it's because you probably missed part 1, so I'm going to link it up here if you want to watch it. But honestly, all the rackets are already ranked. We're basically just adding to the ones we did in part 1, so you don't need to watch that video. And I also did just quickly want to address a comment from that video that was basically saying the whole concept behind a tier list is kind of weird because it's so subjective. And honestly, I do agree with that. I really want to make it clear that this isn't some sort of be-all, end-all definitive ranking of these rackets. It's more of an opportunity for me to talk about all the rackets that we carry as a whole rather than very specifically the way I do in reviews, comparisons, or top 5. So there is a method to where I put these rackets, but honestly, if you think your racket is too low, 1, drop a comment, let me know why you think that. And 2, honestly, don't take it too seriously. Like I said, it's very subjective. There's another thing I wanted to quickly address. Last night we hit 20,000 subscribers, and I just wanted to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Honestly, I did not think we would come this far this quickly, so super exciting. Thank you so much, and yeah, let's keep going. But anyways, let's get into the tier list. All right, so we're gonna get started right away with the Babolat Aero 98, which, guys, the more I play with this racket, the more I'm starting to think it's the most impressive racket of the last 5 years, and I think it's one of the most revolutionary frames of all time. Now, obviously, this is a spin racket, and you definitely feel that when you're playing with it. I mean, it's an Aero, so it accelerates really quickly through the air when you're swinging parallel to the ground. There's a lot of string snapback, and it's got a decent amount of power to it. But what it has that a lot of more traditional spin rackets don't have is a really high level of precision when you're flattening it out and when you're going for big shots, obviously because it has a smaller head size, 98 square inch head size. You look at a guy like Alcaraz, and I think this racket complements him. It couldn't complement him more perfectly. Because it's more precise than more traditional spin rackets, it gives you a certain level of confidence when you go for big shots, which obviously Alcaraz does a lot, and it actually feels really good in the touch game. There's something about kind of the way it feels moving through the air that's super maneuverable, and because the sweet spot is a little smaller, you feel like you get really good touch. So, you know, it's going to be catch-up time for every other brand in the industry trying to match the qualities of the Aero 98. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more kind of high-level offensive juniors playing with this racket because, yeah, it just has a ton of potential. Aero 98 is top tier for sure. Okay, so the Dunlop FX500. Now, I haven't spent a ton of time on court with this racket, probably just an hour or so, but it's another one of these kind of pure drive style rackets, 300 grams, very powerful, very forgiving. It does have a slightly denser string bed in the middle of the sweet spot, which makes the launch angle a little bit lower than something like a pure drive or an ultra, especially an ultra 100 actually. So if you do want a little more control, it's a good racket. But I do think at this point, it's a bit too standard. There's nothing particularly outstanding here. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier. I don't think it can go any higher than that. It'd be interesting to see where Dunlop takes this line in the future because I think some people really like it. So maybe they keep selling to that audience. But yeah, if they wanted to explore a little bit more, kind of like Yonex has done with the EZONE line, that would be interesting. But yeah, C-tier racket for me. Okay, so the Boom MP. Now, obviously, I'm a huge fan of the Boom Pro. You all know that it's my racket of choice. That may be changing in the somewhat near future, but the Boom Pro in specific is another one of these rackets, kind of like the Aero 98, that is really good at most things. The Boom MP obviously has fantastic power and spin because it's just a Boom Pro kind of amplified in the sweet spot up there. Because you go up 2 square inches, that control is definitely not as good. And I think in this 100 square inch package, you almost get too much power and spin potential. The string bed in the middle of the sweet spot up there is really open, so the racket can definitely spray the ball a little bit. So to me, it's a little bit too wild of a racket to be played at the highest level. I do think the Boom Pro shape kind of just complements this style of racket a little bit better because control is much higher on that racket. So yeah, Boom MP is a C-tier racket for me. It's also very comfortable if that's something you're looking for, which I know a lot of people do. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Speed MP, which is another head 100 square inch racket. Honestly, much more well-rounded than the Boom MP. And I've also put the Legend MP here. I talked about it in part 1. I got to talk about it again. I absolutely hate the paint job on the Speed MP. This rubbery matte paint job that they use is it feels weird in your hand. It doesn't look particularly good, and it mutes vibrations a bit too much. Now, I'm not going to put these rackets in different tiers, but I did just want to talk about that. But that's just a little anecdote. Sorry, I will stop waffling about paint jobs now. Let's talk about the Speed MP because this is a racket I didn't use that much before I started reviewing more. maybe because I thought it was too jack of all tradesy. I tend to like rackets that have one particularly special thing to them, but that's definitely not the way you should look at the Speed MP. I actually think the fact that it's such a jack of all trades is kind of that special factor. Like, the power and spin is really, really impressive. I would say this is almost a power and a spin racket, but it's not a power and spin racket because the control is really, really good. Like, this is a very solid control racket. It's more along the lines of a Gravity MP or a Blade 100 than true power or true spin rackets. I don't think it's necessarily improved since last year. Auxetic 2.0 in rackets that have a slightly thicker beam like this, it mutes them a little bit too much, and that combined with this rubbery matte paint job, the racket is definitely muted, but I don't think that's negatively affected it to the point where I would really knock the racket. So honestly guys, I think the Speed MP has to go into the S tier. This is a racket that if you want to shoehorn a frame to your game style, because on paper it's really good, this is one of the rackets I would recommend. I think a lot of people could benefit from the Speed MP, and I think it would improve a lot of people's games. Now, obviously, I've got the Speed Pro in the B tier, and that's because it has better directional control than the Speed MP, but it suffers in pretty much everything else. So definitely a little bit more niche. Okay, so the Shift 99. When I first saw this racket, I actually thought it was very similar looking to the Speed MP. It is quite jack of all tradesy like the Speed MP. I think maybe precision is a little bit better because the head size is smaller. Power is still really impressive. It's definitely not as easy to use as the Speed MP. I think that's the big sacrifice. But what the Shift 99 has is truly elite spin potential. Now, the vertical bending characteristics in this racket are very unique, and I think this is part of the reason why some people are maybe a little bit put off by this frame. You really need to play a spin-friendly style to get the right feel, I want to say. I actually didn't mind it so much when I was playtesting it just because I had a very open mind for it, but the more I go back to it, the more I realize, okay, yeah, this racket is a little bit too far from traditional in the flatter game, but when you're activating that vertical bending, the feel is actually really nice. It's quite plush, it's quite comfortable, especially for how stiff this racket is, and that vertical bending gives you a ton of spin potential, huge snapback. Now, I did put the Shift 99 Pro in the D tier, which some of you disagreed with, and to be honest, I think if the Shift 99 Pro works for you, it's a really, really impressive racket. The Shift 99 makes a little bit more sense to me, where that more open string pattern and that lighter weight just complements this racket's main quality better, which is obviously spin. So I'm actually gonna put the Shift 99 in the A tier. Okay, so the Clash 100. Now last year I put this racket either in the S tier or no, I don't think I put it in the S tier. So I think I put it in the A tier, and my reasoning behind that was if you want a forgiving, powerful, spin-friendly 100 square inch racket, but with insane comfort, the Clash 100 is the best and honestly one of the only options available to you. Now, I still maintain that, and I think because of that, I'm not going to put the Clash 100 any lower than B tier, but obviously the Clash has its issues. It feels quite mushy, quite pillowy, which makes it very ambiguous, and honestly not a racket that can be really played at the highest level. Once you start really needing to rely on the racket's consistency, that's where it kind of falls off a bit of a cliff. But honestly, I can't in good conscience put it any lower than A tier just because for its target audience, which is quite a big target audience, it is the best racket right now. Okay, so the Extreme MP. Now, honestly, I was a little bit disappointed when this one came out because other than Auxetic 2.0, not much has changed here. And I don't really blame Head for that. Like the Extreme MP, those who like this racket will probably like that it's maintained its super, super spinning profile. But when you compare it to something like the Aero 100, which went through a revolution basically 3 years ago or 2 years ago now, where it became a lot more control and consistency oriented, I think this racket is quite a bit less well-rounded than the Aero 100. Now, if you are that type of player that plays super high percentage spin shots, which is obviously a modern style of play, then it is one of the best rackets right now. And compared to the one 2 versions ago, it is a little bit more consistent and control oriented. But I just think it lacks a little bit of variety, I guess, compared to the competition. So I'm gonna put it in the B tier. And honestly, if you do want a spin racket that's more well-rounded like the Aero 100, the Speed MP is a really good option. So yeah, a B tier racket for me. Okay, so the Clash 98. Now this is a 98 square inch version of the Clash 100. So you would think precision and control are much higher. And to a certain extent they are. Like the sweet spot is a little bit smaller here, but it's still a super forgiving racket. And that technology is still very much at play here. Like the Clash 98 is very mushy, very pillowy, and still quite ambiguous. So to me, it's kind of like a Clash 100 that's trying to appeal to a more advanced style of player. So I guess what Wilson is thinking is, yeah, if you're a really good player and you want a comfortable frame, go for the Clash 98. The problem is there's a lot of 98s, 97s that have way more other qualities than the Clash 98, and because they have thin beams, soft beams, they're still very comfortable. So I guess if you want a forgiving, comfortable 98, go for the Clash 98, but then you got the Blade 98. I don't know. It's just a racket that to me isn't going to appeal to that many people. And again, you're going to struggle to play with this one at the highest level where you need to really trust your racket. So unfortunately, I'm going to put it in the C tier. Okay, so the Aero 100. Now, last year I put this in the S tier, but before I do that, let me just talk a little bit about it. Obviously, when this design first came out as the Aero Pro Drive, it was completely revolutionary, literally because it allowed you to put more revolutions on your ball. And since then, I think the Aero 100 has always represented where the industry is in terms of these 100 square inch spin rackets. The last two before this one were basically the highest we've ever really gone in terms of spin potential from a frame, but we slowly started seeing the industry trending back towards control a little bit. And I think Babolat has a really good marketing team or something, because they sensed that trend coming and made the Aero 100 a lot more consistent, which is why I have the Extreme MP a little bit lower here in the B tier, because I think you still get huge spin potential with the Aero 100, but there's nothing wrong with getting a bit more consistency and solidity from your frame, because it does allow you to vary your game a little bit more. So to me, this racket is a solid 2 tiers higher than the Extreme MP, so S tier racket for me. Okay, so the Dunlop FX500 Tour. Now it seems like in today's industry, everybody wants to make their 98 square inch spin and or power racket, because we see it with obviously the Aero 98, VCORE 98, Pure Drive 90. Oh, we got a lot of them coming up here. And some of them are very good, but this is a difficult style of racket to make. And the problem I have with the FX500 Tour is I do find it a little bit jarring, and the sweet spot is quite small. And when you're not making perfect contact every time, it just becomes, I don't know, one of those rackets that I don't think has anything particularly special to it. Like, you obviously do get a ton of easy depth here, but I can't really put it any higher than C tier. Now, maybe I need to customize this frame. I honestly, again, haven't spent that much time trying to dial it in. For those of you who use the FX500 Tour and enjoy using it, let me know if you maybe added a leather grip, some weight at 3.9. Those are probably the customizations I would make if I wanted to give it like a real shot. But I think even with those customizations, I'd still rather choose definitely an Aero 98 and a lot of these other 98 square inch modern spin and power rackets. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put it in the C tier. Just not a racket that has really ever worked for me that well. Okay, so the VCORE 98. Now we have a long list of these more power and spin oriented 98s coming up here. Obviously the VCORE name is technically the more spin oriented line from Yonex, but this racket has a serious amount of power to it, because it's actually shaped very similarly to the Boom, where it has a very squared off top portion of the hoop there, which, like I said, pushes the sweet spot up a little bit higher. So you get so much leverage over the ball when you catch it in the sweet spot. You get a ton of power with this racket. So this is a really well-rounded racket. Now, it's not necessarily my cup of tea. I think I prefer the Boom Pro's more traditional feel. Like, these are actually two very comparable rackets. If you want this frame design, you kind of just have to choose whether you want modern playability, which the VCORE 98 gives you, or more traditional playability, which the Boom Pro gives you. So I think the VCORE 98 needs to go in the same tier as the Boom. An A tier racket for me, and I'm really excited to see where they go with this in the future. Yonex is doing great. Just get rid of vibration dampening mesh and we're on to maybe an S tier racket. Okay, the Pure Drive 98. Now this is just a racket that I think doesn't necessarily work out that well. Now let's talk about its positives. Insane power, okay? Really, truly insane power. Probably the most powerful 98 I've ever tested. But compared to its bigger brother here, the Pure Drive 100, it's not forgiving. It's uncomfortable, which the Pure Drive 100 nowadays is not that uncomfortable of a racket. And personally, I don't think that the 98 score inch racket makes it that much more controlled. When I'm tightening up, I have more trust in the Pure Drive 100 than I do the Pure Drive 98. Again, it's kind of like the FX500 Tour where I haven't given it that much of a chance to kind of customize it to where I think maybe it would be super playable, but I can't really put this racket any higher than C tier. The question is, do I want to put it D tier? No, I'm going to put it in the same tier as the FX500 Tour. I have similar issues with these rackets. I think the FX500 Tour is probably a little bit more comfortable. This one, you really got to be careful with it. And to make it controlled, I almost recommend that you string it at like 58 pounds with a poly, but then, yeah, I mean, comfort is out the window with that. So yeah, a C tier racket. Okay, so the VCORE 100. Now, I'm actually really excited to talk about this racket because I obviously just compared the Boom Pro with the VCORE 98. So you would think the Boom MP and the VCORE 100 could be comparable, but the big difference here is that the Boom Pro is kind of a more traditional VCORE 98. The Boom MP is kind of a more traditional VCORE 100, but at this point with the 100 square inch head size and the thicker beams and the more power and spin oriented styles, they're not traditional rackets at all, which is why the Boom MP is just kind of weird. But the VCORE 100, because it has more spin, you can kind of control it by playing a more spin oriented style. Now, if we're comparing it to more spin oriented 100s, I do think the Aero 100 has more control and consistency than the VCORE 100, but I think the VCORE 100 has more of those than the Extreme MP. So I'm going to put it between the two. I'm going to put it in the A tier. Definitely a better racket than the Boom MP. Just not quite sure I would put it on the same tier as like a comparable spin racket in the Aero 100. Okay, the Pure Drive 100. Now, this racket's getting replaced really soon. It's been out for like three years, I think. To me, this is, yeah, I have a difficult time not putting it in the S tier. I know it's old, I know it's getting replaced, and it's probably going to have improved marginally, which Babolat kind of always does with their lines until they go for a big overhaul like they did with the Aero 100. But yeah, if you want that powerful, user-friendly, spin-friendly, and to be honest, pretty controlled 100, like it's obviously not a control racket, but I find it a lot more consistent than some 100s that are trying to be more control-oriented. Yeah, it's kind of the gold standard right now. It's been that way for a long time. The big improvements they keep kind of making here are making it more comfort-oriented. So yeah, just a line that keeps subtly improving, and it's really, really good. I can't really put it any lower than S tier. I actually love this racket. It's really introduced me to playing with lighter, more user-friendly rackets, and I had always kind of shied away from them because I thought they wouldn't be controlled enough when I needed them to be, but that's not really the case with the Pure Drive 100 to me. And I'm thinking of making a video kind of talking about some lighter rackets and maybe why you'd want to choose lighter rackets in general. So if that's something that would interest you guys, just let me know in the comment section. But yeah, Pure Drive 100 is an S tier racket. Okay, so the Extreme Pro. Now, kind of like the Extreme MP, I was a little bit disappointed when this racket came out because not that much changed, obviously just Auxetic 2.0. To be fair, it's at least proof that Auxetic 2.0 does kind of work in terms of increasing stability for free, but it also really showed that Auxetic 2.0 is more muted. I know a lot of people like this racket. I personally haven't meshed with it that well. I spent a lot of time reviewing this one. I think I went out on hit for about 10 hours, and by the end of it, I was definitely dialed in. It's the type of racket that, yeah, like the Aero 98 is really, really good for spin, gives you pretty decent power and pretty good control as well. Now, if you want a more margin-oriented racket, the Extreme Pro is probably what I would go for, but yeah, the Aero 98 just, it has so much point ending potential that I think the Extreme Pro doesn't necessarily have. So I think it's a better racket overall, but this one's a little bit safer of an option. So I'm gonna put it in a tier under, A tier. Okay, the Percept 100. Now this is another racket that I need to be careful where I put it because it really doesn't work for my game. And let me explain to you why it doesn't work for my game, because I don't think it's just it doesn't work and it's still a great racket and all that. I do think there are some things here that aren't necessarily great for the frame. Like, it has a really high sweet spot, and you can really tell when you hold this racket, there's so much mass. Like, it looks almost bigger than a 100, which kind of makes sense. Like, Yonex rackets do tend to look a little bit bigger than their size, but I just find it super clunky. It's a lot to swing through the air. I know the Speed MP has gone up in swing weight and it's clunkier than it has been previously, but I still find something like the Percept 100 just definitely feels bigger, I want to say. So not as whippy of a racket, not as quick and maneuverable of a racket as its competition in the Speed MP and the Blade 100, but you actually get a really solid amount of power and stability. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. Now don't put your pitchforks away. That's really my personal opinion. I am very much willing to listen to criticism for this one if you guys love this racket. I know a lot of you do. I really wish it was a little bit quicker and more maneuverable. I think that would make it a better overall racket, so B tier. Okay, so the Yonex EZONE 98. Now, this racket came out quite a bit before I started making reviews on this channel, so I haven't spent that much time talking about it. I've done a few comparisons here and there, but obviously no individual review. And maybe you guys think I don't like the EZONE 98 that much. I love the EZONE 98 line in general. It's probably my second or third favorite line of all time, but I'm not the biggest fan of this one. I think you guys know why. I really don't like vibration dampening mesh. And when you combine vibration dampening mesh with the fact that this one got, I think, 0.5 millimeter thicker throughout, I just find that this racket is a little bit too mushy and too ambiguous, which take away from the big positives here, which are control and feel. Now, I have full confidence that when this racket gets a revamp, Yonex will have improved it significantly, and it's already a good racket, so a significant improvement would be awesome. But this is a racket, obviously I'm not gonna put it any lower than an A tier. Like, still on paper, objectively, fantastic power, easy depth, very good control. Like, it's consistent and controlled. It just feel takes away from a bit of that. Spin is really good. So it's obviously another one of these rackets like the Aero 98 and the Extreme Pro that does everything quite well. And it was one of the first ones actually to do that. That's why I think the EZONE, why I like the EZONE line so much all time. But a really elite EZONE would be an easy S tier racket. I'm just not sure that these ones are quite S tier rackets right now. Hopefully, cross our fingers, next generation that's the case, but yeah, A tier for me. Okay, so the Origin. Now, I'm gonna put this either in the C or D tier, but first let me talk about it a little bit. Super fun racket to play with for about 30 seconds. Like, you hit one Rafa forehand with this and you're like, okay, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But you hit that shot, the ball comes back, and now you can't hit another one because either your arm's fallen off, you've broken your wrist, or you're just too tired to move because you're lugging around this like 500-pound tennis racket. So yeah, unless you're Nadal, it's just a really, really tough racket to swing. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier for the fun aspect. No, you know what? I think it has to go D tier. Like, this is just not a racket I would ever recommend to anyone unless, yeah, you want to hit a couple shots like your Nadal. But then the Rafa is just, it's kind of like a Nadal's racket. I think I said this in the previous tier list. Nadal's racket for dummies. We're the dummies. This is the one we should swing. This is a much better racket. I'm actually just going to rank this racket now. I'm going to put the Rafa in the B tier and the Origin in the D tier. Like, if you're Nadal, swing the Origin. If you're me or anyone else, swing the Rafa because the balance is kind of similar, but you don't have Nadal's strength, so toning that all down by like 40 points and 40 grams is definitely the way to go. But I can't put the Rafa any higher than B tier, and the Origin is, yeah, a D tier racket. Okay, now the Clash 100 Pro, again, it's a Clash, so kind of copy paste what I said about the Clash 100 here. Super forgiving, super powerful, quite spin friendly, and extremely comfortable and soft. But kind of like the 98, you're increasing the difficulty level here, obviously, by making it 10 grams heavier, so it is harder to swing. And yeah, I just don't know which high-level players are really gonna want to play with the Clash 100 Pro. I did have a comment in one video that was talking about this racket being misunderstood because there are some high-level players who have really suffered with arm issues, elbow issues, that actually really like this racket because it is more stable and plays a little bit more like an advanced racket than the Clash 100. And I completely understand that. That's a very fair point, but I'm not going to put it on the same level as the Clash 100. I think the Clash 100 is the best version of this racket for sure. So yeah, I guess B tier B tier is good for the Clash 100 Pro. Okay, so the EZONE 100 now, a lot of similarities to what I was saying with the EZONE 98 here. Obviously, the EZONE 100 is a little more forgiving, more powerful and spin friendly, and the big sacrifice you're making obviously is in control, which is one of the major benefits to going for the EZONE 98. So I'm gonna put it in the same tier as the EZONE 98, but I think a good EZONE 98 is a guaranteed S tier racket. I think you have to be a pretty special EZONE 100 to go into the S tier, but yeah, a solid frame. Can't wait to see what they do with the EZONE line soon. Okay, and finally, the Ultra 100. Now, obviously, this is kind of similar to a Pure Drive in a lot of ways, where it's a forgiving, powerful 100. I just don't think it's nearly as special as the Pure Drive. I think the Pure Drive is a much more well-rounded racket. I think if advanced players want to swing one of these frames, the Pure Drive is just going to feel so much more solid. I think the Ultra 100 has maybe a little bit more spin than the Pure Drive 100, but it's kind of similar, I guess, to the Extreme MP versus the Aero 100. I would just almost always prefer to go for a Pure Drive 100 because of its variety. So I think, yeah, I'm just going to put it in the B tier there. I don't know necessarily what Wilson could do to make it much more well-rounded, other than just kind of trying to make it more like a Pure Drive 100, but obviously they have to make it different. So yeah, I just think it's a B tier racket with a bit of capped potential, I guess. But yeah, that is basically going to be the end of this tier list. I know there's going to be some controversial placements here, so please don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I also haven't put any rackets in the F tier. Honestly, I think the way I was thinking about this was the F tier would be for rackets that are actually bad. And I don't think there's any rackets that are bad. Like, I think each racket here serves a purpose. So yeah, and I also just quickly wanted to comment on the RF01 Pro because people keep thinking that I'm getting paid by Wilson to say good things about this racket. I wish I was, as long as they would give me that money, not contingent on me saying good things, which I know makes no sense. But yeah, no, I'm not getting paid to say good things about this racket. This is just a really good racket. I know it's not for everybody and it is quite difficult to use, but for that offensive style, it's super solid. But yeah, anyways, that is going to be the end of this tier list, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to go back to more standard style videos for next week. Obviously, we're in that long stretch of time where there's no rackets to review, so super open to suggestions in terms of comparisons or top fives or whatever you guys want me to make. Just let me know in that comment section. And remember, of course, if you want to demo any of these rackets, you can come visit us in store, or if you want to buy them, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.